Hello friends, welcome to StudyIQ. I am your friend Rahul Saigaonker and today we are going to have a discussion on Budget 2022-23. We all know that today Union Budget was presented by the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. In fact, this was Sitharaman's fourth budget. In the previous three budgets, whenever Sitharaman has presented, there was some sort of a backdrop behind it. If we talk about 2019, she presented an interim budget after the elections and there was a huge electoral mandate behind the NDA. So reforms were expected. But when she presented her budget again in 2020, nobody knew that it would be a pandemic year. And whatever budget estimates were there, they went haywire completely. The government had to spend tremendously on the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana. Too much of borrowing, too much of debt, all these things happened. And last year in 2021, again, it was right in the midst of the second wave where she presented her third budget. And this has been her fourth budget and where she's continuing forward from last year, continuing with the pandemic. Although this year, the impact of the pandemic has not been very severe. The Omicron variant has been rather weak. And we are again looking at economic recovery. That is what we observed in our yesterday's discussion through the economic survey also. Right? So what happened in this budget? What were the SOPs that were presented by the finance minister? What is the direction of Indian economy? Where are we heading? What were the key features of our budget that were presented by the finance minister Nirmala Sitharaman? We are going to discuss all those things. But before that, let's try to understand about budget itself. In the first snippet or in the first section of our discussion, we are going to talk about budget. What exactly is budget? We'll understand some of the factual information about budget and then we'll swoop into budget 2022-23. So what is this term budget? See, budget is a detailed plan of your future expenditure and future revenue. See, normally budget is carried out by everybody. Every individual has a budget, every family has a budget, every state has a budget, every nation has a budget. Now, when I give you an example, every individual has a budget. See, for example, when I was in college, I had my own budget. Although my revenue, independent source of revenue was not there, the money that I used to get was my pocket money. Approximately 2000 rupees per month I used to get from my parents when I was in college. And the expenses I had to plan. Where will I spend the 2000 rupees or how will I spend it? That's nothing but budget, right? Because my revenue is 2000 rupees. I have to plan for one full month based on that 2000 rupees itself. And it was quite constant. The revenue was constant, right? 4 Saturdays in a month, 4 Saturdays we did not have dinner in the hostel, so I had to plan for 4 dinners in a month. Then some other expenditure. If you want to watch a movie, then keep money separately for the movie. If you want to have pani puri, keep money for the pani puri. So this is nothing but budget. You plan your expenses. Like I told you, every individual has a budget, every family has a budget. I'm quite sure at your home the finance minister would be your mother, right? And the revenue would be your father's salary or whatever investments you have made, the interest from the fixed deposits or interest from some other investments. Every month you're getting some money and you have to plan your expenditure, not just for a month, probably for a year. That is what our nation also does. See, for your house, your mother plans in June, she has to pay for education fees because the academic year starts and a huge chunk of money will go in fees of the children, right? Apart from that, there would be expenses for Diwali, monthly expenses over grocery, monthly expenses over the gas cylinder, the electricity bill. All these things have to be planned and everybody runs a budget. And most of the times, I told you my own example when I was a student and I always used to have a budget deficit, right? Because I used to get 2000 and the expenditure was much higher. So very similar to how an individual has a budget, how a family has a budget, a nation also has a budget. Means nation gets revenue from somewhere and it has to plan its expenditure and it is done by the government and we do it annually, right? Because doing it monthly would be rather cumbersome. So we do it annually here. Now, what is the plan here? In the budget, we try to understand from where we will get the money. And since it's the government, it has to spend money. It has to spend money on what? First of all, it has to defend the country. So defense of the country is the job, providing social goods to us, providing roads, government services, all these things. They need expenses and that expenditure is planned in this budget. So budget is nothing but a detailed plan of one's revenues and their expenses for a specified amount of time. And budget for a nation, it is annual. Since the new finance minister has come, she has changed a few things. Now this briefcase has turned into initially a bahi khata, and now everything is transformed digital. Now the finance minister carries a cover like this, wherein she has a India made in India tablet from which she reads the entire budget. So some changes have come, right? So let's talk about this term budget. Do we have a constitutional mention of budget? First thing you need to know is, in our constitution, nowhere the term budget is mentioned, but a term called as annual financial statement is mentioned. So budget is nothing but annual financial statement. Please remember this. Budget is not mentioned in Indian constitution, but there is something called as annual financial statement under Article 112 of Indian Constitution. Now this annual financial statement is basically the estimated receipts, that means from where I am going to get the money, and the estimated expenditure of the government, where am I going to spend the money. Apart from this financial statement for the year, there would also be ways and means to how I'm going to raise the revenue. If I want to spend more, I have to earn more. How can I earn more? How can I better estimate the expenditures in the upcoming financial year? Apart from that, normal economic and financial policy of the year is also mentioned in the budget, right? So please remember this. Budget is not mentioned in Indian Constitution. It's called annual financial statement, as mentioned in Article 112. Now, whenever I say budget, what all does it contain? I told you it contains ways and means of raising revenue, estimates of expenditure, and from FRBMA we also have some estimates of how much fiscal deficit we are going to keep. All these documents are given. But in general, the budget that Union Finance Minister proposes, it contains the data for 3 fiscal years. Please remember the data for 3 fiscal years. It contains the data of previous fiscal years, the actual number, the current fiscal year, the revised numbers of current fiscal year, and the estimates of the upcoming fiscal, or the upcoming financial year, right? Now, you might be confused a little. Now, let me just take you to the initial slide where I started. See, when I talk about budget 2022-23, this is the upcoming year. Please remember, this is the upcoming year. And we all know that the financial year, it starts from 1st April. This is known. It ends on 31st March. Clear? So when I talk about budget 2022-23, this is going to have data for 3 years. The first is the upcoming year, which is 1st April 2022 to 31st March 2023. Now this is the upcoming financial year. That is why we call it estimates. Estimates means how much revenue I am estimating, how much revenue I am anticipating, how much expenditure I am anticipating. So these will be estimates. So our budget will contain estimates for this particular year. Then already we are running in the current financial year. Now what is the current financial year? We know this is 1st April 2021 to 31st March 2022. Now this is the current financial year. Now, what is the previous fiscal? It is the year before that, that is 2020 to 2021. That means 1st April 2020 to 31st March 2021. This is the previous fiscal. Now, this current year's budget, it is going to contain data of these 3 financial years. Now, actual numbers for this particular budget or this particular year, the revised estimates, because last year when the finance minister gave budget, she estimated some things, that my estimated revenue must be this much, my estimated expenditure must be this much. But now, since almost 10 months have gone, we just left out with February and March. So for 10 months, what are the numbers? And I'll just estimate for another 2 months and give you the revised estimates. And for this, we simply have the estimates of revenue and expenditure. Is it clear? So we have 3 years of data in the budget. So please remember these things. Now, apart from this, what is the procedure of budget? Now, we all know today the budget presentation has started. That means on 1st February, the budget is presented. Now, normally, this used to happen on the last day of February before 2017. It used to happen on the last working day of February. But from 2017 onwards, it has been shifted to 1st February because passing a budget, it takes time. We all know that the budget session has started on January 31st, 2022. And budget session would be the longest session of our entire parliament. Now, why? Because once you present the budget, then some other things follow, which takes time, and the budget is eventually passed before some particular date. Now, we all know that the deadline for passing the budget would be 31st March, right? 31st March, why? Because 31st March 2022, the current fiscal is going to get over and the next fiscal is going to start. And if the next fiscal is going to start, I need to have money, right? Because see, I gave you an example. My father has to give me pocket money before first of a month because the month is starting. If that doesn't happen, how will I spend the money? I have to borrow it from someone else. For an individual, it is quite easy. But what about a nation? Then there would be a stagnation in the economy itself. That is why we need to get budget passed, at least some amount of budget where I get the money that has to be finished by 31st March, right? So that's why there is a procedure to get the budget passed. Previously, when the budget was presented on 28th February, there was a lot of delay, and by 31st March, the budget was not passed, or at least the appropriation bill was not getting passed. So that is why the budget date has been now preponed. Every first working day of February, the budget would be presented. Today, the budget has been presented. We know that, right? Now, after this, general discussion follows. I'm quite sure that you must have followed the news that after the speech by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, the House was adjourned. Now, a general discussion takes place on the budget. So, please observe what is going to happen in the Lok Sabha. Now, on this, there is a general discussion that the opposition will ask why so much of funding on this. There is no other thing or some kind of discussion this time. We might expect, apart from budget, discussion on Pegasus or some other issue also. But in general, discussion on the budget takes place, and then the budget is sent to departmental scrutiny for departmental committees, where the estimates would be assessed. Now, let me give an example. Now, imagine that in this particular budget, the allocation for Ministry of Agriculture has been approximately 50,000 crore, right? 50,000 crore for Ministry of Agriculture. Now, in the departmental committee, there would be members of opposition, other people also. They question, why do you want 50,000 crore? It is too much, right? Reduce the amount. So a discussion takes place on this, and then eventually when the House convenes back, voting on demand for grants takes place, because after general discussion there has to be scrutiny. So the budget session would go on a break for some time where the budget is discussed, and when they meet again there will be voting on demand for grants, because I have to pass the check, I have to pass the money, right? I have to pass the check. In a lighter note, I told that ministries should get the money so that all the processes run, the government runs. So for that we vote on demand for grants. Whatever the ministry has demanded, 50,000 crore, yes or no. Now here the opposition can bring certain cut motions, right? Like the token cut motion, the economy cut motion, or policy cut motion, where they do not, they simply want to oppose, or they want to cut some amount from this particular allocation, right? Now, if a cut motion is passed, it puts a question mark over the majority that the government garners. And normally, if a cut motion passes, then a no confidence motion is brought by the opposition, or the ruling party itself can bring the confidence motion to show that they have numbers, right? But remember that passing of a cut motion does not amount to fall of the government automatically, all right? Right. Now, in general, cut motions do not get passed because we do know that the ruling party will have numbers, and that's why they get these demands passed very quickly. And then the fifth step is the passing of appropriation bill. Now, this is like passing of the check. Now, once the check is passed, the money goes to ministries and they can start working. Finally, the finance bill is passed. The finance bill, it contains the proposals, the economic policy and the financial policy for the upcoming fiscal, where the taxation rules, all the other things are included in this finance bill. So it goes in this sequence itself, and I want the aspirants of UPSC Civil Services and State PSC Examination to remember this particular thing, because the first is general presentation of budget, then a general discussion, then the budget is scrutinized by departmentally standing committees, then there is voting on demand for grants, passing of appropriation bill. Please remember, first the appropriation bill is passed. Why? Because first the ministries need money to work, then the finance bill is passed at the end. That's the sequence. So keep a track of all these things, because we know on 1st February this has happened now. I'm quite sure you must have seen the speech by the finance minister. But in the next couple months, you try to focus on these things also. Just watch Lok Sabha TV or see what is happening. You will see a news that the appropriation bill got passed probably before 31st March itself, and then the finance bill gets passed, etc. So keep a track of all these things. Now, after understanding the basics of budget, let's move on and talk about the key features of this year's budget 2022-23. Let's try to understand what has happened here. See, The economic survey that we discussed yesterday, it has projected India's GDP is going to grow by 8 to 8.5% in 2022-23. It also said that the real GDP growth this fiscal, that means the current fiscal year that is going on, it would be 9.27%. This was reiterated by the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman in the Parliament before the budget presentation itself. Later on, the budget details came out. So this year, in this financial year, our GDP is going to grow by 9.27%. That is the estimate. In fact, I told you no other country in the world is going to grow that fast, right? This year's budget, it had a theme, or it had some sort of a flavor. Normally, everybody was anticipating that there would be some big bang announcements, especially in the election bound states, but that did not happen. But this year's budget, it saw a very important theme. It laid the foundation for the next 25 years. In fact, there was a mention of a term called as Amrit Kal multiple times by the finance minister. She called Amrit Kal as the next 25 years, where we are taking India from India at 75. Now this year we're going to celebrate 75th year of our independence, and this year basically lays the foundation of India at 100. That is what she called as Amrit Kal. So Amrit Kal was highlighted, and in the budget, goals of Amrit Kal were also highlighted. So Amrit Kal means from year 2022 to 2047, the next 25 years for India. The focus for India would be growth and inclusive welfare. India would focus on promoting technology-enabled development, transition of energy, and climate action. There would be a virtuous cycle starting from private investment, crowded in by public capital investment. These are the goals mentioned by the government about the Amrit Kal. For the next 25 years, this would be the focus of the government. Apart from that, there has been a sharp increase in the public investment and expenditure, especially capital expenditure, which is going to benefit the vulnerable sections of the country. It was mentioned. But the entire budget, it stood on 4 pillars. The most important announcement has been the Prime Minister Gati Shakti plan, where we have got certain amount of clarity now what constitutes PM Gati Shakti plan, because it is a holistic plan for developing logistics in India. Apart from that, the focus is on inclusive development. Different sectors got huge allocation where the focus is on development of everybody, inclusive growth, inclusive welfare. Then there has been a focus on productivity. The third point is productivity, how to enhance productivity, how to transition energy, because we are talking about clean energy, clean fuels. We are talking about climate action. We want more and more sunrise industries to develop in India. And finally, how we are going to finance our investments, because in yesterday's discussion on economic survey, we saw that India has enough fiscal space. And how are we going to finance our budget? All these things have been mentioned. So these are the 4 pillars under which we are going to have a discussion about the budget itself. We are going to have a discussion under these 4 heads only. But before all those things, first things first, where does the rupee come from? That means how the revenue is coming for India. I told you budget is the estimate of revenue and the estimate of expenditure. How much money is coming and from where it is coming. If I talk about 1 rupee, out of that 35 paisa is borrowing or liability. That is why the debt is also increasing. So huge amount comes from borrowing. But we are also paying taxes. Corporate taxation amounts to 15%, income tax amount to 15%, custom tax 5%, excise duties 5%, and GST, it has grown handsomely. 16% is coming from GST. Apart from that, there are non-tax revenue and non-debt capital receipts, which totally make a rupee or 100% of our revenue. And where we are spending, see, if we are taking loans, if we are borrowing, then we are paying also back. We are paying as an interest. This is the kind of concept we know as EMI, equated monthly installment, but that's not the same for the country though. But we have to pay the interest. We pay 20% whatever we get as interest. Apart from that, we pay 15% to the central sector schemes. For defense, 8%. For subsidies, we pay 8% money. For centrally sponsored schemes, 9% money. I told you the government, it earns revenues as taxation. It has to spend money for social goods. They have to provide us social services. Basically, the government services like roads, electricity, all these things is provided, right? Apart from that, there is other expenditure, pensions, finance commission transfer to the states, etc. These constitute the expenditure of the government, union government, right? And then what is the budget amount for us? See, the revenue receipts, they have been continuously going up. Now this clearly shows that our tax base is slowly and steadily broadening. GST collection has been at a record high, especially the January 2022 GST collections were record high from the time GST has come. So revenue is slowly and steadily increasing. The capital receipts have gone down, but revenue expenditure, we see it is also increasing. See, if revenue expenditure increases, it's a bad thing. But if capital expenditure increases, it's a very good thing, because if we are investing in capital expenditure, it is going to give us returns continuously going forward. And now we are thinking of indicative planning. That means for 25 years, we're talking about Amrit Kal. So if we spend on capital expenditure now, and you can see capital expenditure has gone up more than 1 lakh crore, to be precise, 1,06,000 odd crores in this year. The budget estimates have been more than 1 lakh crore of capital expenditure. This has been a major theme of the current budget, right? Now, if we look at the budget in a glance, how does it look like? When I say my budget size is 39.45 lakh crores, that means I am spending this much of money. The budget size for India is 39.45 lakh crores. The earnings, as I told you, we have got certain loans, debt receipts, capital receipts, and we also have net tax receipts from the GST, from income tax, from corporation tax. There are non-tax revenues also. This comes, but the spending is very high. Approximately around 22 lakh crore is our earning, and our spending is much higher, 39 lakh crores. So there is a deficit, and that is why we have to borrow. That's what is called as a fiscal deficit, right? Because we have to borrow and we have to spend more. But if we spend it on capital expenditure, it is going to give us returns in future. That is the concept of fiscal deficit. Please remember, everybody thinks that fiscal deficit per se is bad. No. Please remember, if the fiscal deficit, which gives you the amount of borrowing that the government does, if that borrowing is used for useful means, especially for capital expenditure, fiscal deficit can be very beneficial. That is why we normally say some amount of fiscal deficit, especially sustainable amount of fiscal deficit, is okay for a country, because if we borrow and if we spend on capital expenditure, it is going to give us yield in future, right? So this is the overview of our budget. Now, before we jump into the 4 pillars, everybody asks one question whenever there is a budget. Will I have to pay more taxes, right? The first thing you need to know is there is no change in the tax slabs. So the taxpayer is not impacted. There has been no change in the tax slabs. The same tax slabs which were there previous year, they are being continued. No change in the corporation tax, no change in the individual taxpayers, etc. But there has been a new provision which has been proposed. So in the finance bill, which will be passed henceforth, a new proposal has been given by the finance minister, which will allow the taxpayers to file their updated returns. That means you can file the returns within 2 years from the end of relevant assessment year. Again, you can file updated returns. If you think that there was some sort of a mistake in the previous year, you can file an updated return. Apart from that, cooperative societies have got some benefit. The alternate minimum tax that the cooperative societies used to pay, it was 18.5%. Now it has been reduced to 15%. And this reduction has been mainly because the surcharge has been reduced. Apart from that, under the fiscal policy, we can see that the tax deduction limit has increased to 14% on employer's contribution in the NPS account. That means the state government is going to contribute more and more towards your NPS account. Right? So this was the initial discussion where we spoke about the budget and the taxation. Let's now move on and talk about the 4 pillars or the 4 priority areas in our budget. The 4 priority areas or 4 pillars are PM Gati Shakti, as I mentioned. The second one is inclusive development. The third one is how to enhance productivity, how to develop sunrise industries, what about the energy transition and the climate action, and finally, how we are going to finance our investments. These are the 4 priority areas. Now we'll discuss this one by one, as I mentioned. First, we'll talk about PM Gati Shakti. Now, what is this PM Gati Shakti plan? This has 7 engines of growth. As I told you, PM Gati Shakti is a master plan for developing logistics in India. The 7 pillars are roads, railways, airports, ports, mass transport, waterways, and logistic infrastructure. In budget, there has been some detail given about the Gati Shakti master plan, under which the expressway master plan is going to be developed by the government. Apart from that, this fiscal's target has been 25,000 kilometer roads in the year 2022-23. The railway sector has got huge boost under the PM Gati Shakti plan. 400 new generation Vande Bharat trains would be developed in the upcoming 3 years. The government is going to start one station, one product. That means on every railway station there would be one product which would be popularized. Apart from that, 100 PM Gati Shakti cargo terminals are going to come up in the next 3 years. Apart from this, metro system, multimodal connectivity system will be facilitated in the next 3 years. A very interesting announcement came with respect to Parvatmala. See, when we talk about PM Gati Shakti plan, it combines everything. The Sagar Mala, the Bharat Mala, all the road connectivity projects that we have, it subsumes under the Gati Shakti master plan itself. Apart from all this, there is one more announcement called as Parvatmala. Now, Parvatmala, by the name itself, we can guess here, it is connected to the hilly regions. Conventional roads would be built in hilly regions via PPP mode. That has been announced. But there is another announcement. National Ropeway Development Plan has been proposed as a sustainable alternative to conventional roads in the hilly regions. As of now, 8 contracts for the ropeway projects have been floated and they will be awarded by 2022-23 for approximately 60 kilometer length in the hilly regions in India. So a very interesting announcement under the Gati Shakti master plan. Now, apart from this, the second priority was inclusive development. In fact, here we'll have a lengthy discussion about different sectors where we see how the government is going to benefit agriculture, how it is going to benefit the health sector, the education sector. All these things would be focused on. The first thing under inclusive development is agriculture. The government announced that it is going to continue procurement of wheat and rice. 1,208 lakh metric tons would be procured from 163 lakh farmers, which would eventually transfer 2.37 lakh crores directly into their accounts via the MSP. That was announced by the government. Apart from that, the government is promoting the chemical-free farming as well as zero-based natural farming. The government announced that they are going to set up an agriculture finance fund and agriculture startup fund which would promote agriculture startups, and funds would be provided for FPOs. A technology based announcement did come in the budget where the finance minister announced Kisan drones. Now there would be promotion and spreading of Kisan drones for crop assessment, digitization of land records, spraying of insecticides and nutrients. So in future, I would say during the Amrit Kal, probably in the next 25 years, I wouldn't expect large-scale deployment this year itself, but as I said, the foundation is being laid now. In the next 25 years, we might expect more and more promotion to Kisan drones, and in future, probably next decade, we are looking at farmers using drones to spray insecticides and nutrients. But as of now, a beginning has already happened. Apart from that, a very important data I want you to remember is 2023 has been announced as the International Year of Millets. So the government is going to provide post-harvest value addition support for millets. They are going to enhance domestic consumption of millets as well as they will help in branding of millets, not just nationally but to export also outside. So 2023 is the International Year of Millets. Do remember this. Right. Next up, we'll talk about irrigation. Now, under irrigation, the government has announced the implementation of the Ken-Betwa link project where the funding has been allocated 44,605 crore worth funding is allocated for the Ken-Betwa link project. Apart from this Ken-Betwa, the government has again announced 5 river interlinking projects. Daman Ganga Pinjal, Par Tapi Narmada, Godavari Krishna, Krishna Pennar, and then Pennar Kaveri. These 5 river linking projects have been announced, and the state governments would be brought on board first, and then the project DPR would be prepared and then implementation would start in future. So irrigation is also one of the important parameters in this budget. Apart from this, the MSME sector has got some SOPs. The Udyam, eShram, NCS and ASEEM portals will be interlinked now. Apart from that, the additional credit lines would be provided to MSME. We all know that emergency credit line guarantee scheme is being run and it has now been extended to March 2023. Till next year it would be available. The expanded guarantee has also enhanced from 1 lakh crores to 5 lakh crores. Apart from this, MSMEs will also get Credit Guarantee Trust for Micro and Small Enterprises. This has been revamped with additional funding worth 2 lakh crores. So a lot of SOPs for MSMEs also. Apart from MSMEs, skilling has also got important focus from the government. The government will launch digital ecosystem for skilling and livelihood. Desh Stack e-portal. This is going to be launched. Apart from that, startups will be promoted to facilitate drone SHAKTI through different applications. Now, for this, select ITI colleges in different states are going to bring required courses for implementing this drone SHAKTI. A very interesting thing towards skilling India. Apart from that, education sector is going to get more and more digital facilities. The state governments are being encouraged to revise their syllabi in their agriculture universities to bring in new ideas like the modern methods of farming, natural farming, zero budget farming, etc. Apart from that, one class, one TV channel program of the PM E-Vidya will be expanded. Right now it is available on 12 channels. It would be expanded to 200 channels. Now this will enable all the states to provide supplementary education in regional languages from class 1 to 12. Apart from that, high quality e-content is being developed, or a program to develop high quality e-content is proposed by the government. And a digital university is going to be set up, a very interesting initiative, digital university based on hub and spoke model. Through this digital university, digital education would be provided to all the different states in regional languages. So first, high quality content would be created, and through digital university, it would be dispersed to the requisite people or the intended beneficiaries. Right? Now, after education sector, health sector has also got many proposals. The first one is building an open platform for national digital health ecosystem. Now, this digital ecosystem under health is going to consist of digital registries of health providers and health facilities, where there will be unique health identity of individuals. Universal health access facilities would also be included in this ecosystem. So health is being integrated. Apart from this, COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen that it is impacting the mental health of many people. The toll of lockdowns, the toll of individuality, where you're not having any social life. We have seen that during 2020 and 2021 also. It has impacted the mental health of many Indians. And for this, National Telemental Program is being launched. The government will launch this in collaboration with NIMHANS. NIMHANS is the nodal center which will run this. NIMHANS is a center in Bangalore. It will collaborate with IIIT Bangalore, which will be the tech partner in the National Telemental Program. Apart from this, Mission SHAKTI, Mission Vatsalya, Saksham Anganwadis and Poshan 2.0, which were launched in the recent times, they are going to be further strengthened. So all these programs are going to continue. The allocation would be more and more towards the health sector also. Apart from health sector, urban planning is another important focus area. The finance minister announced that by 2050, 50% of Indians are going to reside in urban areas. So we need to have urban planning. We already know the problems in many urban areas, the problems of urban flooding, the problems of congestion, traffic problems, lack of infrastructure, lack of basic facilities. All these problems are known and problems are seen. I'm quite sure that if you are living in any of the metros, you must have seen these problems. And for this, a high-level committee for urban planners and economists is going to be set up, which will recommend how to build urban capacity planning, how implementation is going to be done, and how urban governance is to be run. So whenever this committee is set up, we'll talk about that. But apart from that, about 60,000 crore has been allocated so that there is clean water to about 3.8 crore households in this fiscal year 2022 to 23. So huge allocation has gone towards Har Ghar Jal program. Apart from that, in 2022-23, the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana is going to get another chunk of big allocation. In the fiscal 2022-23, 80 lakh households would be identified under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, both rural as well as urban. For this, 48,000 crore rupees have been allocated for Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. There is one initiative for Northeastern India. There is a PM initiative for NER which has been announced. It is PM Divine, basically. PM Development Initiative Scheme for Northeastern region. It would be launched. Now, this is going to be clubbed in spirit with the Prime Minister Gati Shakti program. Ultimately, this is going to help in creating livelihood opportunities. It is going to help the youth and the children in the Northeastern region. Host of schemes have been announced, And some of the examples are promoting scientific organic agriculture in the northeastern India. This would be one of the schemes under PM Divine. Construction of Aizawl bypass has also been approved under the PM Divine. There would be a pilot project for construction of bamboo link road in the northeastern region. So these are some of the examples of schemes which are a part of PM Divine program, Prime Minister's Development Initiative for the northeastern region. Apart from this, financial inclusion measures have also been announced. Now, 100% of 1.5 lakh post offices will come on the core banking system. That means post offices will now provide you internet banking, mobile banking, ATMs, online transfer facilities. All these things would be provided. And once post offices become these core banking facilities, it is going to benefit a large chunk of population, especially farmers, senior citizens who are present in rural areas. That means in the upcoming times, banking is going to reach to the masses. Post offices as banks in rural areas, they are going to be game changer in this Amrit Kal in the next 25 years. The government has also announced 75 digital banking units will be brought in 75 districts in the country as a part of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav by Independence Day this year. So these were some of the swaps announced under the inclusive development domain. And in the productivity enhancement and other things, we talk about different sectors which are going to be focused by the government. For example, in the telecom sector, the government has announced the scheme for design-led manufacturing, which would be launched to develop 5G ecosystem. And here, the production link scheme would be expanded to the 5G ecosystem also. Apart from that, to enable affordable broadband and mobile services and proliferation in rural areas, 5% of annual user service obligation, which is signed by the telecom operators, it would be allocated so that rural areas get better internet service, better mobile services. The government also announced an animation, visual effect, gaming and comic promotion task force, which is going to set up and recommend ways to realize and build capacity in this particular field in animation, visual effects, gaming and comic, which has huge global demand. Apart from telecom sector, defense sector is going to get huge chunk. Defense sector is going to be opened up for defense R&D. 25% of defense R&D budget will be opened up for industry, startups and academia. Private industry would be encouraged to take up design and development of military equipment and military platforms. 68% of capital procurement of defense is earmarked from our own defense industry itself, which is a great development, because we talk about becoming Atmanirbhar, and defense imports is one area where we have been faltering for a long time. But now 68% of capital procurement will happen from Indian domestic defense industry itself. Last year it was 58%, this year it has been enhanced by another 10%. The government's motto has been minimum government and maximum governance. Towards that, the government has taken many steps. The finance minister announced that over 25,000 compliances have been reduced by the government. More than 1,400 union laws have been repealed which were redundant. Apart from that, in 2018, a single window clearance portal called as Parivesh was launched, and the scope of this portal is now going to be expanded further to give quick approvals, environmental approvals for the projects. We spoke about the e-passport scheme, right? In recent times, we have discussed about that, and the finance minister has announced that this year in 2022-23, chip-enabled futuristic technology passport issuance will start. Another big announcement was Center for Processing Accelerated Corporate Exit, CPACE, with process re-engineering will be established. Now this has been a very important development here, because in India we know that the exit policy has been quite cumbersome. So under the CPACE, the companies that needed 2 years for winding up, now that would be completed within 6 months itself. If there is a sick company or a sick industry and it wants to close up voluntarily, then it would be finished within 6 months through the CPACE initiative. So all these things are going to enhance India's ease of doing business. Apart from this, energy transition proposals have also been mentioned in the budget. The government, we know that it is already shifting towards public transport. It is talking about metros, multimodal connectivities, etc. Now, to complement all this, clean tech and governance solutions are being proposed. A zero fossil fuel policy is going to be developed. Promotion of electric vehicles is already being progressed through the FAME scheme. Add to this, the government is going to bring a battery swapping policy, very important development in upcoming year in 2022. We might expect a battery swapping policy with interoperability standards. Now here, once your battery is run out, especially out of electric vehicles, you need a lot of time for charging, right? So under the battery swapping policy, some things would be developed, some operability standards would come, where if you run out of battery power, you simply replace the battery at the petrol station or the charging station, and similar kind of battery would be given to you with decent voltage, with similar kind of current, and then you can simply replace the battery and run. Now it's very similar to refueling your petrol. Just go there, give your battery, take a new battery, fix it and run. That's the new kind of policy. This is going to encourage the private sector to take up some innovative business models where battery interoperability or battery swapping would become more prominent in the upcoming times. Apart from this, climate action has also been mentioned. India is bringing sovereign green bonds, a very, very important development. The funds from the sovereign green bonds are going to be used up in green projects so that we reduce the carbon intensity from Indian economy. Sovereign green bonds now will be a part of government's borrowing plan in financial year 2022-23. Proceeds are to be deployed in public sector projects from the sovereign green bonds. Apart from this, very important announcement came in the budget. From now on, 5 to 7% of biomass pellets would be co-fired in thermal power plants, which will result in the less release of carbon dioxide, that is the greenhouse gas. So biomass pelletization industry is going to get a fillip very soon. Apart from this, we all know that we are running a national solar mission. We have a very ambitious solar target of 280 gigawatts by 2030. Under this, a huge allocation of 19,500 has gone as a part of production linked initiative towards the solar industry so that they bring more and more efficient solar modules. So this was the third pillar or the third priority area where the government focused more and more on productivity, building the sunrise industries, climate action, energy transition. And now let's move to the final priority area, that is financing of investments. And under this, the biggest announcement, perhaps I would say the big bang announcement, has been the capital investment. The government clearly knows that capital investment, it holds the key to speedy and a sustained economic revival, because capital investment will have a multiplier effect. We know that right now we are borrowing too much, and if we spend in capital investments, it is going to reap rewards in future. It is going to have a huge multiplier effect on all the other sectors, on the MSME sector, on the large industry, small industry, services sector, everywhere will get this multiplier effect. And because of this, the government has stepped up its capital expenditure. This year, the capital expenditure target is 7.5 lakh crores. 7.5 lakh crores. Now, in FY23, the capex is at 2.9% of GDP. The actual capital expenditure would be more than 10 lakh crore, right? Pardon me, because in one of the previous discussions, I mentioned it as 1 lakh 6,000 odd. It was 10 lakh 6,000 odd crores, right? So you can see here, the capital expenditure is going to increase more and more. The gross budgetary support, it is being rising. It is continuously rising from 2014. If you look at the number today, it stands at 7.5 lakh crore through the budgetary allocation. And if we add the grant in aids, it is going to go cross 10 lakh crores. So huge capital expenditure. This clearly shows the focus on the Amrit Kal, because it's a part of indicative planning where the government is planning for the next 25 years. Right now, capital expenditure, huge capital expenditure, it is going to give you more and more rewards in future. Now that means we are looking at enough fiscal space. This was mentioned even in the economic survey. If we look at the transfers to states and union territories, that is also increasing continuously. In the budget year 2022-23, it is highest 16.12 lakh crore that would be transferred to states and union territories as transfer from center to state, because we know center's finances are much higher than states. So every year there has to be transfer from states, center to states, right? Now, once we are going for more and more expenditure, we are giving more fiscal space to the states also. That means our fiscal deficit is going to rise also. And this year's fiscal deficit target has been set at 6.4%. You can see here, if you look at this particular peak, this would be the pandemic years, the first wave, the second wave, slowly and steadily the fiscal deficit is reducing. But even now, the fiscal deficit is very, very huge, 6.4%. Now, if we talk about the FRBMA targets, it mentions approximately 3% of fiscal deficit. But we are almost at the double level. But again, this is owing to the extraordinary circumstances because of COVID-19. And in the coming years, we might expect a reduction in fiscal deficit further. But despite this fiscal deficit, if we are spending it in capital expenditure, it would give us more benefits in future for sure, right? Now, apart from this, the government has also announced a very important thing, that they will bring their own digital currency. Now, this clearly gives an indication towards something, that the cryptocurrencies or the digital currencies have been noticed by the government. Now, everybody was asking, will the government regulate cryptocurrencies or not? There was a huge announcement in this year's budget that the government will tax income from the digital assets. That means the cryptocurrencies itself at a rate of 30%. I'm repeating, the government is going to tax the income from digital assets at 30%. There will be no deduction allowed while computing income except the cost of acquisition. A TDS of 1% on the payment mode for transfer above a monetary threshold has been decided. But in short, cryptocurrencies are now on the radar of the government. They have understood that people are investing more and more in cryptocurrencies, and it can become a good source of revenue. So they are going to tax at a very higher rate of 30%. Apart from this, as I mentioned, government itself is proposing to bring a digital rupee, a digital currency which would be developed on the blockchain technology itself, and it would be controlled by the Reserve Bank of India. Probably this fiscal, we are going to look some development over that. But once this is announced, what does this indicate? First of all, are cryptocurrencies now legal in India? That's a question, because taxation is happening. We can say indirectly, yes, they are legal, but the government itself is starting their own digital currency. What does this mean? Is it a threat to the cryptocurrency market here? Are the other cryptocurrencies going to be banned? Still, a question mark over cryptocurrencies remain. But as of now, we can indicate that they have got some sort of a legal status, especially because it is being taxed by the government at a rate of 30%. Right. Apart from this, the government has announced a means of blended finance. Now, to promote the sunrise industries, sunrise sectors such as the climate action, deep technology, digital economy, pharma and agriculture tech, the government is going to promote thematic funds in way of blended finance. Now, blended finance means where the government will also play a role and the private sector will also play a role. That means the government funding, private funding, and this fund would be managed by private fund managers. Such kind of blended funds would finance the sunrise sectors and the sunrise projects. So the government is planning to increase its own revenues through the sovereign bonds, the green sovereign bonds. Now they are going to tax the cryptocurrencies. They are looking at blended finance. So we are looking at more and more investment in the Indian economy going in the future. So in the upcoming years, what can be expected? India is heading towards a growth trajectory. We are getting back on track. As we saw in the economic survey, the growth levels, the projections are almost pre-pandemic level, and from here India can go in only one direction, that is up. And that is why many other investors from abroad also are quite interested in India, that India is the most upcoming and the growing market. Right. So that was the discussion basically on the budget, on the 4 priority areas. Let me end the discussion with some of the information which would be very useful for you. Like how much is the allocation for the major schemes? The National Health Mission, its allocation has increased from 34,947 crore to about 37,800 crores in this year budget. Jal Jeevan Mission's funding has also increased 60,000 crore, as I mentioned. Apart from that, the National Education Mission, its funding has enhanced by 9,000 crore. Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, from 14,000 crore, now 19,000 crore has been allocated for Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. PM Kisan funding has also increased from 67,500 to 68,000 crore rupees. Atmanirbhar Bharat Rozgar Yojana, 1,400 crore jump has happened. Pradhan Mantri Swasthya Suraksha Yojana from 7,400 crores to 10,000 crores. So insurance sector is headed for a growth because of this particular allocation. And if we talk about the allocation ministry wise, you will see that the Ministry of Communication has got about 1,05,000 crores. Ministry of Chemicals 1,07,000 crores. Again, Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers, where we have a fertilizer subsidy also, huge subsidy. Ministry of Agriculture has got an allocation of 1,32,000 crore. Ministry of Railways 1,40,000 crore. Ministry of Home Affairs 1,85,000 crores. In future, we are looking at allocation, higher allocation for roads. Ministry of Road, Transport and Highways, almost 2 lakh crore expenditure. And then Ministry of Consumer Foods and Public Distribution, where subsidy is quite large. So that has also got allocation more than 2 lakh crore. The huge chunk goes to Ministry of Defense. We do know that 5,25,000 crore it has gone to Ministry of Defense. So this is the allocation to different ministries, just for your reference, so that if some questions come in the state PSC, you can get that very easily, right? That was the discussion on budget. Let me end my discussion by giving a very interesting insight here. Last year also, Nirmala Sitharaman had quoted two things, right? And I spoke about those quotes also. But this year, again, when she spoke about taxation, she gave a very interesting quote from Mahabharata, Shanti Parva Adhyaya Shlok 11. This is the shlok. The translation in English is this: the king must make arrangements for Yogakshema. If you are from political science and international relations, you must have heard the term Yogakshetra from Yogakshem from the Dharma Shastras. You have seen these ideas in Kautilya's ideas also, Manusmriti also. They all talk about Yogakshema. Do let me know in the comment section which company has the motto or the logo Yogakshem. You'll find a very interesting information here. The quote says, the king must make arrangements for Yogakshem of the populace by way of abandoning any laxity and by governing the state in the line of dharma, along with collecting taxes which are in consonance with dharma. So the government basically is trying to say that they're collecting taxes in consonance with the dharma and they are looking for Yogakshema through this particular budget. That's the indication from this shloka. With that note, let me end this discussion. I hope this was useful for you. Thank you for watching this. Jai Hind.